Ethan Collins had been staring at the same line of code for 17 minutes when the email arrived. No sender, no subject, just a link and 5 words that shouldn't have mattered. Remember the life you were meant to live. He deleted it, then undeleted it from trash, then sat in his Mount Pleasant apartment, surrounded by the detritus of a life on autopilot, empty takeout containers, monitors glowing with error logs, a succulent his mother had given him 3 years ago that refused to die despite his neglect. The email waited in his inbox like a door he couldn't quite close. 3 days later, at 2:47 a.m., Ethan clicked the link. The website was nothing. Black background, white text, an address in East Vancouver's industrial sprawl. No company name, no testimonials. Just a promise that read like science fiction. Access memories from the lives you didn't live. See what you chose not to become. The price was listed in cryptocurrency. The amount made him wince, but not enough to close the tab. Ethan told himself it was curiosity that drove him to the warehouse district the next evening. Not desperation, not the suffocating weight of 42 years spent wondering when his real life would begin. Just curiosity about what kind of operation ran memory scams from abandoned buildings. The steel door sat between 2 condemned structures, unmarked, except for a number that matched the website. Inside, fluorescent lights buzzed over what looked like a veterinary clinic's fever dream medical equipment that seemed borrowed rather than bought. Walls of exposed insulation, a woman in surgical gloves who introduced herself only as Chen. First time? Chen asked, leading him to a reclining chair that had seen better decades. She moved with the efficiency of someone who'd done this hundreds of times, or wanted him to think she had. Is it that obvious? Ethan replied. You're still asking questions with your eyes, she observed. Most people want to know how it works. The science. And, he prompted, quantum entanglement across probability waves. Every choice creates a branch. This, she tapped the syringe, lets you access memories from branches you didn't take. Sometimes fragments, sometimes more. That's impossible, Ethan said. So was the internet once, Chen countered. She swabbed his arm with alcohol that smelled too sharp. Fair warning, some people get nothing. Some get exactly what they're looking for. And some get answers to questions they should never have asked. The needle went in cold. The world went sideways. Then Ethan remembered. Not like a dream or a daydream or even a particularly vivid thought. He remembered with the weight of lived experience. Emily's laugh breaking through his concentration as he worked on blueprints at their kitchen table. The way their daughter Maya chewed her lip when solving math problems, exactly like her mother. Their son Daniel's soccer cleats clicking on hardwood despite being told a dozen times to take them off at the door. He remembered the house in Victoria, how morning light filtered through the Douglas firs in their backyard. He remembered being an architect, the satisfaction of seeing structures rise from his designs. He remembered dinner parties with colleagues who'd become friends, vacations that weren't just escape attempts, a life that felt inhabited rather than endured. The memories were so specific, so saturated with sensory detail, that when Chen's voice pulled him back, "You're done. Take your time," Ethan nearly vomited from the dissonance. That wasn't... He gripped the chair's arms, knuckles white. Those were real. Those happened. In a sense, Chen said, disposing of the syringe with practiced indifference. Somewhere, someone, a version of you lived that life. The question is, why didn't this version? Ethan stumbled out into the Vancouver drizzle, his apartment key feeling foreign in his hand. He had a wife named Emily, had 2 children, had a career that mattered, except he didn't, had never met anyone named Emily, had no children, had spent 20 years debugging other people's mistakes. But he remembered Emily's birthmark, shaped like a comma, just below her left shoulder blade. Sleep was impossible. Ethan spent the night cross-legged on his floor, laptop open, searching for Emily Morrison, because he knew her maiden name, knew she'd grown up in Winnipeg, knew she'd studied architecture at the University of Toronto. He found her by dawn. Emily Morrison Chen, different Chen, he noted with relief, lived in Toronto. Architect at a firm specializing in sustainable design. Married 15 years. Two children, Sophie and Marcus. Not Maya and Daniel, but the same ages, the same spacing between births. Her professional headshot showed the same crooked smile he remembered from their first anniversary dinner at that terrible Thai place they'd loved. Except they'd never had a first anniversary. They'd never met. Ethan called in sick to work, a first in 3 years, and dove deeper. University of Toronto's architecture program, class of 2006. Emily's name was there in the graduation records. His wasn't, though he remembered walking across that stage, remembered his mother crying in the audience, remembered Emily squeezing his hand before they went up for their diplomas. Except his mother couldn't have been in that audience. The realization hit him like code suddenly compiling after hours of debugging. He pulled up his mother's medical records. She'd given him access years ago for emergencies. January 2006, viral cardiomyopathy. 6 months of treatment, full recovery by July. In the life he remembered, the happy life, she would have been dead by January. Ethan drove to his mother's house in Burnaby, pushing through morning traffic with the desperate momentum of someone who'd just discovered they might be living in the wrong timeline. She answered the door in gardening clothes, dirt under her fingernails, alive in a way that suddenly seemed impossible. "Ethan, it's 9 in the morning, on a weekday," Margaret said, surprised. "Mom, I need to ask you something," he said, following her to the kitchen, where everything was exactly as it always was. Herbs on the windowsill, his kindergarten art still on the fridge after 37 years, the coffee maker gurgling its familiar rhythm. "In 2005, when you got sick, did I have options? Other schools?" His mother's hand paused halfway to her coffee mug. "Where is this coming from?" "Please," he urged. She studied him with the kind of attention that made him feel 5 years old again, caught in a lie about who broke the lamp. "You were accepted to Toronto. For architecture." The words landed like physical objects. "I was accepted?" "Full scholarship. You were so excited you couldn't sleep for a week," she said, pouring coffee with deliberate slowness. "Then I got sick, and you deferred, then declined. Said you wanted to stay close to home." "You never told me to stay," Ethan said. "I told you to go," Margaret replied, her voice carrying an edge he'd rarely heard. "I had good doctors, insurance. Your father's life insurance was more than enough, but you'd made up your mind that I needed you. You had cardiomyopathy. You could have died. I could have died if you'd stayed. I could die tomorrow," she said, setting her mug down hard enough to slosh coffee onto the counter. "You didn't stay for me, Ethan. You stayed because staying was safer than leaving." The kitchen felt too small, the morning light too bright. Ethan wanted to argue, to defend the 22-year-old who'd made an impossible choice, but he actually remembered a different version of himself, getting the call about his mother's death while standing in a Toronto dorm room, Emily's hand on his shoulder as he collapsed. "I need some air," he said. His mother caught his arm at the door. "Whatever this is about, whatever you're wrestling with, you can't change the past by reliving it. Trust me. I've tried." Ethan spent the next 3 weeks dismantling his life like a detective investigating his own murder. He tracked down his acceptance letter to Toronto buried in a storage unit he'd forgotten he still paid for, alongside yearbooks and photo albums that felt like evidence from someone else's crime scene. The letter was dated March 15th, 2005. Full scholarship to the School of Architecture. The words exceptional portfolio and tremendous potential mocked him from 20-year-old paper. He found Emily Morrison Chen's thesis project online, a community center designed to bridge socioeconomic divides through shared spaces. He remembered helping her with the concept, remembered the late nights arguing about load-bearing walls and sightlines. Except he hadn't. She'd done it alone, or with someone else, or with no one. The memories from the injection weren't fading. If anything, they were growing sharper, more insistent. He could recall Daniel's first word, dog, pointing at a cat. Could feel the weight of Maya's newborn body in his hospital scrubs. Could taste the champagne from Emily's promotion celebration. The good stuff they couldn't really afford but bought anyway. He started making mistakes at work, missing meetings, submitting code that didn't compile. His manager, Greg, called him into a video meeting with the careful tone of someone approaching a wounded animal. "Ethan, is everything okay? This isn't like you," Greg said cautiously. Ethan stared at his own face in the laptop camera, hollow eyes, 3-day stubble, the look of someone coming apart at the seams. "I'm fine, just tired. Maybe take some time off?" "You have 6 weeks banked," Greg suggested. 6 weeks. He'd never taken more than 3 days consecutive in 20 years. What was the point of vacation when you had nowhere to go, no one to go with? "Yeah, maybe I will," Ethan said. That night, Ethan returned to the warehouse district. The steel door was locked, no answer to his pounding. But Chen emerged from the shadows by the dumpsters, smoking something that smelled like cloves and regret. "You're back early," she said. "Most people wait at least 6 months before chasing a second hit. I need to know more. About how it works. About what happens to the other timeline," Ethan said urgently. Chen took a long drag. "Why?" "Because I remember a whole life. A wife, kids, a career. And I need to know if I'm losing my mind or if—" "You're not losing your mind," she interrupted. "The memories are real. They happened, just not to this version of you. But they're so specific, so complete," he insisted. "That's the problem with quantum extraction. Sometimes you get fragments, a birthday party, a first kiss, a car accident. Sometimes you get the whole narrative," Chen said, studying him with clinical detachment. "You got the whole narrative, didn't you? The life where everything worked out." "How do you know it worked out?" Ethan asked. "Because you're here at midnight, shaking like an addict, wanting more," she replied. She dropped the cigarette, crushing it under her heel. "Let me guess. In that life, something tragic happened early. Something that freed you to become who you were meant to be." Ethan's silence was answer enough. "There's always a trade," Chen continued. "The universe doesn't give happy endings for free. Every version of you that succeeded did so because another version paid the price. That's not—" But Ethan couldn't finish the sentence. His mother had died in the other timeline. That was the price of his happiness. "I can give you another injection," Chen offered. "Show you more timelines. The one where you became a musician. The one where you married your high school girlfriend. The one where you died at 32 in a car accident, but saved 3 lives doing it." She pulled out a ring of keys that jangled like wind chimes. "But here's what they don't tell you about quantum extraction." She unlocked the steel door, gesturing for him to follow. "Every time you access a timeline, you collapse it. Quantum mechanics 101 observation changes the outcome. The you that lived that life, the one with Emily and the kids, he's gone now. You killed him when you looked." The clinic felt smaller in the dark, medical equipment looming like accusations. Chen flicked on a single fluorescent that made everything look underwater. "That's impossible," Ethan said. "I can't kill someone by remembering them." "You can, if they only exist as probability waves," Chen replied, preparing another syringe, this one glowing faintly blue. "The technology doesn't just access memories, it collapses quantum states. Every injection is a murder across dimensions." "You're lying," Ethan accused. "Am I? Or is that easier to believe than the truth that you've been murdering better versions of yourself just to feel something?" she challenged. Ethan backed toward the door, but Chen wasn't following. She just stood there, syringe in hand, waiting. "This one's free," she said, "if you want to see more. But know that every timeline you access is one less possibility in the multiverse, one less chance for any version of you to get it right." He ran. Out the door, through the rain, past abandoned buildings that looked like skeletons in the dark. He drove home on autopilot. The irony wasn't lost on him, and locked himself in his apartment. The memories wouldn't stop coming. Maya's school play where she forgot her lines but kept going anyway. Daniel's hockey game where he scored the winning goal and looked for Ethan in the stands. Emily painting the nursery soft yellow because they didn't want to know the baby's gender. They felt more real than his actual life. More vivid than 20 years of code and coffee and quiet desperation. Ethan pulled up Emily Morrison Chen's architecture firm website. Her bio mentioned her inspiration, the belief that spaces shape lives, that the right building can change someone's story. There was a contact form. He could write to her. Say what? That in another timeline they were married? That he remembered their children who didn't exist? Instead, he searched for obituaries. January 2006, Vancouver. He found her on the third page of results. Margaret Collins, 58, died January 15th after a brief illness. Survived by her son, Ethan, a first-year architecture student at the University of Toronto. The same date, the same age, the same person. Dead in one timeline, alive in another. And the difference between them was him. His phone rang. His mother, because of course it was. He'd missed Sunday dinner 3 weeks running, and Margaret Collins didn't believe in subtle hints. "I'm making lamb," she said without preamble. "Your favorite." "Mom," Ethan began, "and I want to talk about whatever's been eating you alive. Don't pretend it isn't. I know my son," she said firmly. Did she? Did she know he'd been carrying 20 years of resentment like a security blanket? Did she know that in another timeline, her death had set him free? "I'll be there," he said. The drive to Burnaby felt like swimming upstream through time. Every intersection was a choice that led to this moment, turning left instead of right, staying instead of leaving, choosing safety over possibility. His mother had set the table for two, the good china that usually only emerged for holidays. The lamb was perfect, because Margaret Collins didn't do anything halfway, except, apparently, die. "So," she said, cutting straight through small talk like she always did, "are you going to tell me what's wrong, or should I guess?" Ethan set down his fork. The lamb tasted like childhood, like Sunday dinners before he'd learned to resent them, like a life where choices were simple and consequences distant. "Do you ever think about parallel universes?" he asked. His mother raised an eyebrow. "Is this about physics or philosophy?" "Both." "Neither," Ethan said. He pushed peas around his plate, 5-year-old habits resurfacing. What if every choice creates a split? One universe where you go left, another where you go right. "Then there are infinite versions of us having infinite dinners," Margaret replied, sipping her wine. The good stuff, he noticed, not the boxed kind she usually drank alone. Some where the lamb is overcooked. "I'm serious," he said. "So am I," she countered. She set down her glass with deliberate precision. "Ethan, I've been watching you disappear for 20 years. Not all at once, bit by bit, choice by choice, until you became this ghost haunting your own life." "That's dramatic," Ethan protested. "Is it? When was the last time you dated someone? When was the last time you took a risk? Built something that wasn't code?" She leaned forward. "When was the last time you forgave yourself for staying?" The words hung between them like a confession neither wanted to claim. "You knew," Ethan said slowly, "about Toronto, about architecture. You knew I blamed you." "Of course I knew. You're not as subtle as you think," Margaret said. She stood, began clearing plates with mechanical efficiency. "You want to know the truth. I was relieved when you stayed. Terrified, but relieved. My son would be close, safe, available." "Mom," he started, "I was selfish and scared, and I let you use me as an excuse because it was easier than watching you fail 3,000 kilometers away," she continued, turning on the water, beginning to scrub dishes that didn't need it. "But you want to know the worst truth? You were relieved too." Ethan wanted to argue, but his throat had closed around the words. "Architecture school would have been hard. You might have failed, might have been ordinary instead of exceptional, might have discovered you weren't who you thought you were," Margaret said. She turned off the water, faced him with hands still dripping. "Staying was safe. Staying meant you could always wonder what if, without ever finding out." "I found out," Ethan said. The words escaped before he could stop them. His mother tilted her head. "What do you mean?" So he told her. About the injection, the memories, the life where she died, and he thrived. He expected disbelief, anger, anything but the quiet acceptance that settled over her face. "The warehouse on Pandora Street," she said softly. "The woman named Chen." Ethan's world tilted. You know about it? How do you think I know what my life would have looked like if your father hadn't died? Margaret asked, sitting back down, suddenly looking every one of her 78 years. If that drunk driver had turned left instead of right? You've been there? He asked, stunned. 3 times. I've seen the life where Robert lived, where we had 2 more children, where I became a professor instead of an administrative assistant, she said, smiling, though it didn't reach her eyes, where you had siblings to share the burden of my illness. Mom, Ethan breathed. The memories fade if you let them. Takes about 6 months, but I can still feel the weight of babies that were never born, she said. She reached across the table, took his hand. The thing about those other lives, they're not better, just different. That version of me, the professor with the living husband, she never learned she could survive anything, never discovered she was stronger than she imagined. But she was happy, Ethan insisted. Was she? Or is that just what you need to believe? Margaret challenged, squeezing his hand harder. Ethan, you've spent 20 years convinced that staying here ruined your life. But what if leaving would have ruined it differently? That night, Ethan couldn't stop thinking about quantum collapse, about Chen's words. Every observation changes the outcome. He pulled up academic papers on quantum mechanics, fell down rabbit holes of theory and mathematics that made his programmer's brain ache. At 3 a.m. he found it. A paper from 2019, published in a journal nobody read, about quantum consciousness and probability waves. The author was Dr. Michelle Chen. The same Chen, had to be. The paper was dense, theoretical, but one line stood out. When parallel states are observed simultaneously, the observer becomes a fusion point, collapsing not just one probability, but entire probability chains. Ethan read it 3 times before the implication hit. If Chen was right, he hadn't just killed the other version of himself. He'd killed that entire timeline, Emily's happiness, their children's existence, every person whose life intersected with that version of reality. He drove back to the warehouse, speeding through empty streets with the desperate momentum of someone who just realized they might be a mass murderer across dimensions. Chen was there, always there, as if she existed outside normal time. How many? Ethan demanded. How many timelines have people collapsed? Thousands. Tens of thousands. Chen replied calmly. Every desperate person looking for a better life, killing infinite versions of themselves. We have to stop. Shut it down, he said. Why? Because you feel guilty? She laughed, sharp as broken glass. The universe doesn't care about your guilt. Those timelines were always ephemeral, existing only as potential until observed. But the people, Ethan protested, were never real to this timeline. Can you mourn someone who never existed? She asked. I can mourn Emily, the children, he said. No, you can mourn the idea of them. The possibility, Chen corrected. She pulled out the blue syringe again. One more injection. See all the timelines at once. Understand the full scope of who you could have been. That would collapse them all, Ethan said. Yes, but you'd finally understand that none of them matter except this one, the one you're actually living. Ethan stared at the syringe, at the liquid that promised knowledge and annihilation in equal measure. What happens if I don't? If I just walk away? Then you spend the rest of your life haunted by memories of happiness you never earned, Chen said. She set the syringe on a medical tray, stepped back. Or you could do something radical. What? He asked. Live. Make choices. Risk failure. Build something in this timeline instead of mourning all the others. It's too late. I'm 42, Ethan said. In one timeline, you didn't start architecture school until 45. In another, you met Emily at 60. In another, you're already dead, Chen said, moving toward the door. The only timeline that matters is the one where you're standing here right now, deciding what happens next. Ethan looked at the syringe, at the door, at Chen waiting with infinite patience. Will the memories fade? Of Emily and the kids? He asked. If you let them. If you fill your real life with enough actual experiences to crowd them out, she replied. He thought about his mother, 78 and gardening, having chosen to let her parallel lives go. Thought about Emily Morrison Chen in Toronto, building her life without him, happy in her own timeline. Thought about 20 years of resentment he'd cultivated like a poisonous garden. "Keep it," he said, walking past the syringe, past Chen, toward the door. "Someone else will need it more." Outside, Vancouver was waking up, delivery trucks rumbling past, coffee shops glowing warm against the dawn, people beginning days that could go 1,000 different ways. Ethan sat in his car, pulled out his phone, and did something he hadn't done in 20 years. He opened his laptop, not to code, but to search. Architecture programs, Vancouver mature students. The results loaded slowly, each one a door to a possibility that existed in this timeline, the only one he had left. His phone buzzed. A text from his mother. "Breakfast? I'm making waffles, the real ones, not frozen." He texted back, "Yes. And Mom? Thank you for surviving." Her response was immediate. "Thank you for finally deciding to do the same." Ethan drove toward Burnaby, toward waffles and his living mother, and a future that wasn't perfect, but was his. In his rearview mirror, the warehouse district faded into morning mist, taking with it the ghosts of lives he'd never lived. The memories of Emily and the children were still there, might always be there, but they felt different now, not like amputated possibilities, but like dreams, vivid and meaningful, but ultimately separate from the waking world. At a red light, Ethan pulled up the University of British Columbia's architecture program. Evening classes available. Portfolio review required. The application deadline was in 6 weeks. 6 weeks to build a portfolio, to risk rejection, to choose this timeline, this life, this version of himself that hadn't been erased by observation. The light turned green. Ethan drove forward into a morning that belonged to no one else, toward a mother who'd survived to see it, toward possibilities that existed not in parallel worlds, but in the choices yet unmade. Behind him, invisible, infinite timelines continued their dance, unobserved, uncollapsed, irrelevant to the only story that mattered, the one he was finally, after 42 years, beginning to write.